I'll never forget the day I got that frantic call from Mrs. Simmons across the street. Her voice trembled with panic as she spoke. "Michael, come home now. The HOA people, they've done something terrible to your mother." My heart dropped into my stomach. I was 30 minutes away at work, reviewing blueprints for a new construction project. I'd left Mom comfortable in her wheelchair on our front porch, enjoying the spring sunshine and her morning tea, something she did every day since her stroke last year. "What do you mean? What happened?" I asked, already grabbing my keys and heading for the door. "They've chained her wheelchair to the porch railing. They're saying she can't be visible from the street anymore. She's crying, Michael. They're treating her like she's trash." The world tilted beneath my feet. My gentle 68-year-old mother, a retired kindergarten teacher who'd raised me alone after Dad died, chained like an animal? I broke every speed limit getting home. When I screeched into our driveway, the scene that greeted me was worse than I'd imagined. Mom sat weeping in her wheelchair, a heavy bike chain wrapped through the wheels and locked to our porch railing. Two men in suits stood over her while a woman in a blazer was taking photos. Our neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, some recording with their phones, others arguing with the suited people. I leaped from my car, rage boiling up like I'd never felt before. "What the hell are you doing to my mother?" I shouted, rushing up the walkway. The woman with the camera turned, her expression cold as ice. "Mr. Davidson, I presume? I'm Victoria Harrington, president of Sunshine Estates HOA. Your mother's presence on the front porch violates our neighborhood aesthetic standards." I stared in disbelief. "You chained my disabled mother to a railing because of aesthetics?" Section 14.3 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that medical equipment cannot be visible from the street, Victoria explained, consulting a tablet. "Wheelchairs fall under that category. She's a human being, not equipment." I tried to push past the men, but they blocked my way. "This is private property enforcement," one man said. "Interfere and we'll call the police." "Please do," I replied through gritted teeth. "Call them. I'd love to explain how you've imprisoned my mother." Victoria sighed like I was a child having a tantrum. "Your mother refused to go inside when we explained the violation. We had no choice but to secure her until you returned to address the situation." My mother's voice, weak from crying, cut through my rage. "Michael, please. Just get me inside." I looked at her tear-streaked face, at the chain biting into her wheelchair spokes, and something inside me snapped. I knew right then that I would make these people pay not just for today, but for every petty rule and power trip they'd inflicted on our neighborhood since taking over the HOA board last year. "The key," I demanded, holding out my hand. "Now." Victoria nodded to one of the men, who reluctantly handed over a small padlock key. As I unlocked the chains, I spoke quietly enough that only they could hear me. "You have made the biggest mistake of your lives today." That night, after settling Mom with some tea and her favorite show, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by paperwork. The HOA had left a formal violation notice with a $500 fine for improper display of medical equipment and failure to comply with HOA directives. My neighbor Sam, a retired police officer, sat across from me, his face grim as he reviewed the photos he'd taken. "This isn't just wrong, Michael. It's criminal," he said. "False imprisonment, elder abuse, discrimination against a disabled person. I've called some friends at the precinct. They want to talk to your mom tomorrow." I nodded absently, flipping through the HOA bylaws. "There's nothing in here about wheelchairs or medical equipment being prohibited on porches. They made it up." "They've been making up rules for months," Sam said. "Remember when they towed Mr. Garcia's car because they decided overnight that work vans weren't allowed? Or when they fined the Williams family because their daughter's adaptive swing set was an eyesore?" I did remember. Since Victoria Harrington and her friends had taken over the HOA board in a barely attended election last year, Sunshine Estates had transformed from a friendly, diverse community into a neighborhood ruled by fear and arbitrary enforcement. "It's not just the rules," I said. "It's how they target certain people. Have you noticed they never cite the board members' friends? But families with elderly or disabled members get violations every week." Sam leaned forward. "You think there's a pattern?" "I know there is. They want certain people out. People who don't fit their image of a perfect neighborhood." My phone buzzed with a text from Jenny Thompson, whose son had autism. "Did you hear what they did to your mom? They threatened to fine us yesterday because Thomas was stimmying in the front yard. Said his behavior was disturbing. We're selling. Can't take it anymore." I showed Sam the message, my heart sinking. The Thompsons had lived here for 10 years. "That's 5 families pushed out in 3 months," I said. All with elderly or disabled members. Sam's eyes narrowed. You know, pushing people out of housing based on disability or age is a federal offense. You think the police will care about an HOA dispute? Maybe not the local police, Sam said thoughtfully. But I have a buddy who retired from the FBI Civil Rights Division. This might interest him. The next morning, I took Mom to the police station to file a report. Detective Rivera listened carefully, his expression darkening as Mom described how she'd been chained to our porch for nearly 2 hours. They said I was bringing down property values, she said quietly. That people don't want to see sick people when they drive through the neighborhood. Detective Rivera looked up from his notes. Mrs. Davidson, did they specifically mention your disability? Mom nodded. Victoria said wheelchairs send the wrong message about the community, that they make people think of nursing homes. I watched the detective's face harden. He excused himself briefly, returning with his sergeant. Mr. Davidson, we're taking this very seriously, the sergeant said. What happened to your mother crosses several legal lines. We'll need statements from witnesses and any video footage neighbors might have. I already collected some, I replied, showing them my phone. Several neighbors had sent me their recordings. The sergeant nodded appreciatively. That helps. We'll also need copies of your HOA bylaws and any communication you've had with the board. As we left the station, Sam was waiting outside with an older man in a crisp button-down shirt. Michael, this is Robert Chin. We served together years ago before he joined the feds. The man extended his hand. Mr. Davidson. I'm sorry about what happened to your mother. Robert's with the FBI Civil Rights Division, Sam explained. I told him about the pattern we've noticed. I looked at Mr. Chin skeptically. The FBI cares about HOA disputes? We care about coordinated efforts to violate civil rights, Mr. Chin replied. Housing discrimination based on disability or age falls under our jurisdiction. What happened to your mother is disturbing, but if it's part of a pattern targeting protected classes, that's something we take very seriously. For the first time since yesterday's nightmare, I felt a flicker of hope. Over coffee at a nearby diner, I showed Mr. Chin everything I had. Photos of the incident, the violation notice, and a list of families who'd been harassed or pushed out of Sunshine Estates in recent months. All 7 families who've left or listed their homes have elderly or disabled members, I explained. Meanwhile, 32 violation notices have been issued in the last 3 months. 28 went to households with disabled or elderly residents, who make up less than 20% of the neighborhood. Mr. Chin studied the documents. That's statistically significant. Have you noticed anything else unusual about the HOA's activities? I hesitated, then decided to share my other suspicion. 3 houses that were sold after HOA harassment were purchased by the same company, Harrington Development Group. Related to Victoria Harrington? Mr. Chin asked, eyebrows raised. Her husband's company. They're renovating and flipping them at a 30% markup. Mr. Chin closed his notebook. Mr. Davidson, I think we should continue this conversation more formally. Would you be willing to come to our field office tomorrow? The FBI field office was intimidating, all glass, steel, and serious faces. Mr. Chin led me to a conference room where 2 other agents waited, introducing themselves as specialists in housing discrimination and financial crimes. We've reviewed your initial information, Mr. Davidson, said Agent Patel, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. We find it concerning enough to open a preliminary investigation. Into the HOA? I asked. Into what may be a coordinated effort to violate federal fair housing laws, she clarified. We'll need more evidence, but what you've shown us suggests a deliberate pattern of discrimination with potential financial motives. For the next 3 hours, I walked through everything: the incident with Mom, the HOA's history of selective enforcement, and the property purchases that followed. Do you have access to HOA financial records? Agent Martinez asked. I shook my head. They've refused to share them, even though bylaws require transparency. That's interesting, Mr. Chin noted. What about board meeting minutes? Same story. Victoria claims they're being organized. The agents exchanged looks. Mr. Davidson, Agent Patel said carefully, what you're describing suggests more than discrimination. There may be financial impropriety as well. You mean they're stealing HOA funds? Possibly. Or using their positions to facilitate private business advantages, which could constitute wire fraud if HOA communications were involved. I sat back stunned. I just wanted them to stop harassing my mother. Mr. Chin smiled grimly. You may have stumbled onto something much bigger. Here's what we'd like you to do. I left with a plan and a sense of purpose. The FBI couldn't share details of their investigation, but they needed more evidence from inside the HOA. Evidence I could help gather legally. That evening, I invited several neighbors for dinner, including Janet Pierce, a retired attorney who'd also been targeted by the HOA for her garden accessibility modifications. The FBI believes there's a case, I told them quietly. But they need more evidence. Janet's eyes gleamed. I've been documenting everything. And I'm not the only one. By the end of the night, we had formed the Sunshine Estates Homeowners Defense Group. Each person had a role. Janet would review the legal aspects, Sam would coordinate with his police contacts, and others would gather documentation of HOA abuses. My job was the most difficult. I needed to get closer to the HOA board. The opportunity came faster than expected. The next day, I received an email from Victoria Harrington herself. Mr. Davidson, in light of recent misunderstandings, we believe it would be beneficial to have more homeowner input on the board. Would you be interested in applying for our newly created community relations position? Sam laughed when I showed him. They're scared. They know you filed a police report and they're trying to neutralize you. Or set me up, I said. But either way, it's an opportunity. I accepted the invitation with a carefully worded email expressing my desire to help improve communication between the board and residents, language vague enough to seem cooperative without compromising my true intentions. The following Tuesday, I attended my first HOA board meeting as a prospective member. Victoria introduced me with a tight smile. Michael has expressed interest in helping us improve our community outreach, she said. We've invited him to observe today's meeting before making a final decision. I smiled pleasantly, noticing how the other board members, Victoria's husband Richard, their friend Marcus, and two women I didn't know well, watched me warily. The meeting was eye-opening. Behind closed doors, they spoke openly about their community improvement strategy. Marcus presented a report on problem properties that needed motivation to sell. Every single one belonged to elderly residents or families with disabled members. The Williams property is proving stubborn, Marcus said. Despite 17 violations this month. Increase the fines, Victoria suggested. And start daily inspections. Document everything. What's the rush on Williams? I asked innocently. Their property looks well maintained to me. An uncomfortable silence fell. Richard cleared his throat. It's a matter of community standards, Michael. Some properties require more attention than others. The meeting continued, but I'd caught them off guard. When they discussed finances, they spoke in vague terms, referencing reserve allocations and maintenance contingencies without specifics. After the meeting, Victoria took me aside. What did you think? Eye-opening, I said truthfully. I had no idea how much work goes into managing the neighborhood. She studied my face. We had concerns given the unfortunate incident with your mother. But Richard thinks you might be an asset helping us communicate with certain demographics. I've been thinking about that incident, I said carefully. I understand you were just enforcing the rules, even if I disagree with the method. Victoria's posture relaxed slightly. I'm glad you see it that way. Rules are necessary for maintaining standards. Absolutely, I agreed, hating myself for the words. Without them, who knows what kind of people would move in. She smiled for the first time. Exactly. So, are you interested in joining us? Very, I lied. When can I start? That night, I reported everything to Mr. Chen via the secure email he'd provided. You're doing well, he responded. We need financial records next. Meeting minutes aren't enough. The problem was accessing those records without arousing suspicion. Fortunately, Janet had an idea. According to state law, she explained, HOA members have the right to inspect financial records with proper notice. I'll request them officially, citing the law. They'll either have to comply or create a paper trail of refusal. The next day, Janet sent her request. Victoria responded with a terse email claiming the records were under audit and unavailable for 90 days. Perfect, Janet said when I showed her. I've just filed a complaint with the State Housing Authority citing their refusal. That gives us legitimate grounds to keep pushing. Meanwhile, I continued attending board meetings, playing the role of willing accomplice while documenting everything. The FBI had provided me with a special pen that recorded audio, which I used during every meeting. 3 weeks into my infiltration, Victoria invited me to a strategy session at her home. Only the inner circle would attend. You've shown real commitment, Michael, she said. We think you're ready to help with some of our more ambitious community improvements. That evening I arrived at Victoria's sprawling house, my recording pen in my pocket and a knot in my stomach. Richard greeted me with a tumbler of whiskey and led me to their home office where Marcus and the two other board members waited. "Michael," Victoria began, "what we're about to discuss requires absolute discretion. We've built something special in Sunshine Estates and we're not finished." Richard activated a PowerPoint presentation titled, "5-Year Transformation Plan." What followed was shocking even to me who already suspected their motives. The plan detailed how they would systematically drive out undesirable elements, their exact words, and replace them with premium buyers. Homes acquired would be renovated through Harrington Development and sold at maximum profit. HOA funds would be used for targeted improvements that benefited these premium properties. Phase 1 is nearly complete, Victoria explained proudly. We've removed 7 properties from the problematic category. "The 7 families who left," I said, struggling to keep my voice neutral. "Exactly. Phase 2 targets 12 more properties, including the entire eastern cul-de-sac. My street. My home. My mother. How do we encourage them to sell?" I asked, praying my voice didn't betray my horror. Marcus grinned. "That's where you come in. As our new community relations director, you'll help us identify leverage points for each property." "Leverage points?" "Vulnerabilities," Richard clarified. "Everyone has them. Financial pressure, family situations, health issues. You know your neighbors better than we do." I nodded slowly, my mind racing. "And the Williams family? What's their leverage point?" Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Their son's behavioral issues. We've documented every episode. One more major incident, and we threatened to sue for disturbing the peace." "A child with autism," I said flatly. "A liability to property values," Victoria corrected. "Nothing personal. It's just business." I took a long drink of whiskey, buying time. "And my mother? Is she part of Phase 2? The room went silent. Richard and Victoria exchanged glances. "We hoped you'd understand our vision by now, Michael," Victoria said quietly. "Your property is strategically located. Corner lot, southern exposure, excellent renovation potential." "I see," I said, fighting to keep my expression neutral. "And what's our leverage point?" Richard looked uncomfortable. "We don't need one anymore. We have you." The implication was clear. They expected me to convince my mother to sell. To betray her after everything. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "Smart strategy." The meeting continued for another hour, detailing their plans for every target property. When I finally left, I sat in my car around the corner and vomited. With shaking hands, I called Mr. Chin. "I need to meet now. I have everything you need." The next morning, I met with the entire FBI team in a nondescript office building across town. They listened in silence as I played the recording and showed them the photographs I'd secretly taken of their presentation. "This is exactly what we needed," Agent Patel said. "Clear evidence of a coordinated scheme using HOA authority to violate federal housing laws." "There's more," I said, pulling out a flash drive. "After I left last night, Janet accessed the HOA email server." Mr. Chin looked alarmed. "How did she manage that?" "She used to work in IT. And Victoria uses the same password for everything. The emails confirm everything. They've been targeting families with elderly or disabled members from the beginning." Agent Martinez plugged in the drive. "This changes the timeline. We need to move quickly before they realize you're not on their side." "What happens now?" I asked. "We prepare to execute search warrants," Mr. Chin explained. "But we need to ensure the safety of potential victims first. Can you warn the targeted families discreetly?" I nodded. "We have a secret Facebook group. I can alert everyone without the board knowing." "Do it. Tell them to preserve any documentation of harassment. And Mr. Davidson, your mother should stay somewhere else for a few days." That evening, Mom packed a small suitcase and went to stay with her sister in the next town. I sent coded messages to our neighbors group, warning them to secure any evidence of HOA misconduct. Then I waited. The next day, Victoria called an emergency board meeting. Her voice on the phone was tense. "We need to accelerate Phase 2. There are rumors of homeowners organizing against us." When I arrived at the community center, the atmosphere was electric with nervous energy. Victoria paced while Richard whispered urgently with Marcus. "We have a problem," Victoria announced when everyone arrived. "Someone has been spreading misinformation about our community improvement efforts." "What kind of misinformation?" I asked innocently. Accusations of discrimination, financial impropriety, Richard said. Completely unfounded, of course, but damaging nonetheless. We need to act decisively, Victoria continued. I propose we implement immediate special assessments on all Phase 2 properties. $15,000 per household for infrastructure improvements. Can we do that? I asked, feigning confusion. Section 22.4 gives us emergency assessment powers, Marcus explained. Most of these families won't be able to pay. They'll have no choice but to sell. And who will buy their homes? I pressed, pushing my luck. In such a difficult market? Victoria's smile was cold. Harrington Development has already secured financing to purchase all 12 properties. Brilliant, I said, hoping they couldn't hear my heart pounding. When do we start? Notices go out tomorrow. We need unanimous board approval. I raised my hand along with the others, knowing it was the final piece of evidence needed. As the meeting ended, Victoria pulled me aside. Michael, I'm concerned about Janet Pierce. She's been asking questions about our finances. Do you know anything about that? I shook my head. She's always been nosy. I can talk to her if you want. Would you? We can't afford distractions right now. I agreed, then walked to my car, fighting panic. They were getting suspicious. I needed to warn Janet. I drove straight to her house, but her driveway was empty. I called her cell, no answer. Finally, I tried Sam. Janet's fine, he assured me. She's with the FBI giving her statement. They're moving on the warrants tomorrow morning. Relief flooded through me. Thank God. Victoria's getting paranoid. I think they might be catching on. Just keep your head down one more night, Sam advised. And Michael, you did good. Real good. I drove home slowly, emotionally exhausted but hopeful for the first time in weeks. As I turned onto my street, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked near my house. Then another down the block. Unmarked but clearly official. The FBI wasn't waiting until morning. They were already in position. I parked in my driveway, trying to act normal. Inside, I poured a glass of water and waited. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Emergency meeting at my house. 9 p.m. Critical situation. I replied, on my way, knowing I wouldn't be attending. Instead, I sent a message to Mr. Chin. They're panicking. Emergency meeting called at Victoria's house, 9 p.m. His response was immediate, stay home. It's happening now. At precisely 9:15 p.m., my quiet street erupted into activity. FBI vehicles converged on Victoria's house, while others simultaneously arrived at the homes of every board member. From my window, I watched agents in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI approach Richard and Victoria's front door, search warrant in hand. News traveled instantly through our neighborhood group chat. FBI at Marcus's house. Agents taking boxes from Victoria's office. They're arresting Richard Harrington. I sank into my couch, overwhelming relief washing over me. Mom was safe. Our home was safe. The nightmare was ending. My phone rang. Mr. Chin. It's done, Mr. Davidson. We're executing search warrants at 5 locations simultaneously. The evidence we found already exceeds our expectations. What happens to the HOA now? I asked. The State Housing Authority will appoint temporary management until new elections can be held. Your neighbors won't face any immediate threats. After hanging up, I called Mom to share the news. She wept with relief. I can come home tomorrow? She asked. Yes, I promised. And you can sit on the porch as long as you want. The next morning, news vans lined our street. The story had broken overnight. FBI raids suburban HOA in discrimination investigation. Reporters approached neighbors for statements, and many were finally ready to tell their stories. Mrs. Williams described how the HOA had tried to force them out because of her son's autism. Mr. Garcia showed reporters the outrageous fines he'd received for non-existent violations. And Janet Pierce, now returned home, provided legal context for what she called one of the most egregious abuses of HOA power I've seen in 30 years of practice. I avoided the cameras, not ready to discuss my role publicly. But Sam found me sitting on my back patio. The FBI spokesman just gave a statement, he said, sitting beside me. They've been investigating Harrington Development for months. Wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion. Your HOA case broke it wide open. I shook my head in disbelief. All I wanted was justice for what they did to Mom. Sometimes justice has a way of expanding, Sam said wisely. Victoria and her crew didn't just target your mother. They hurt dozens of families. Now they'll answer for all of it. Later that afternoon, Mom returned home. Neighbors lined the street, applauding as I helped her from the car to her wheelchair. Someone had tied balloons to our mailbox. Janet Pierce presented Mom with a bouquet of flowers. "Welcome home, Mrs. Davidson," she said warmly. "Your porch missed you." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you all for fighting for me. For all of us." I wheeled her up our ramp and onto the porch where this nightmare had begun. She reached for my hand. "Michael, I've been thinking. When this is all settled, maybe I should run for the HOA board." I laughed, then realized she was serious. "Really? After everything that happened?" She nodded firmly. "That's exactly why. Power shouldn't belong to those who want it most, but to those who will use it wisely. These are our homes, our lives. We should have a say in how they're governed." Looking around at our neighbors gathered on the lawn, elderly couples, families with special needs children, people of various backgrounds and circumstances, I realized Mom was right. This wasn't just about stopping corruption, it was about building something better in its place. Sunshine Estates HOA under new management, I mused. I like the sound of that. The community center buzzed with conversation as residents filed in for the first HOA meeting since the arrests. Temporary administrators from the State Housing Authority had managed things during the investigation, but tonight we would elect a new board. Mom sat beside me in her wheelchair, reviewing her notes. She decided not only to run for the board but to campaign for president. Her platform was simple: transparency, inclusivity, and common sense. Janet Pierce was running for treasurer, promising complete financial accountability. Sam had nominated himself for security coordinator, focusing on community safety rather than surveillance and intimidation. Even Mrs. Williams, whose son had been targeted by the old board, had stepped up to run for community relations director. Her first proposal: sensory-friendly community events. Victoria Harrington and her co-conspirators were facing numerous federal charges. The investigation had uncovered evidence of widespread fraud, not just in our HOA, but in 3 others where they'd implemented similar schemes. They'd stolen over $2 million in HOA funds and illegally forced out dozens of homeowners based on age and disability. The FBI had frozen all assets of Harrington Development, including the 7 homes they'd acquired through their scheme. Those properties would be returned to their original owners with restitution, assuming the criminal case ended in conviction, which seemed increasingly likely. As the meeting began, Mr. Chin slipped into the seat beside me. He was attending as an observer to ensure the election proceeded fairly. "Quite a turnout," he noted, gesturing to the packed room. "People care again," I replied. Victoria's biggest weapon was apathy. Nobody came to meetings, nobody questioned their decisions. That's changed. The election proceeded smoothly. Mom won the presidency with nearly unanimous support. The new board reflected our diverse community: young families, retirees, people with disabilities, all represented. In her acceptance speech, Mom addressed the painful recent history head-on. What happened in Sunshine Estates wasn't just about a few corrupt individuals. It was about what happens when we stop paying attention, when we surrender our power to those who would abuse it. The HOA should serve the community, not rule it. And it should protect all residents, especially the most vulnerable among us. She looked directly at me as she continued, "When they chained me to my porch that day, they thought they were showing their power. Instead, they revealed their weakness. True strength comes from lifting others up, not holding them down." The room erupted in applause. As people lined up to congratulate the new board members, Mr. Chin leaned over to me. "Your mother is remarkable," he said admiringly. "The Bureau has interviewed hundreds of HOA fraud victims nationwide. Most just want to move on. She's the first I've seen who wanted to fix the system from within." "She's always been that way," I said proudly. "When I was a kid, the school tried to cancel the art program. Most parents just accepted it. Mom started teaching art classes in our garage." Mr. Chin smiled. "People like your mother make our job easier. We can prosecute criminals, but we can't build communities. That takes ordinary people doing extraordinary things." After the meeting, neighbors gathered in small groups, discussing ideas for community improvements. The atmosphere felt nothing like the tense, suspicious mood that had pervaded Sunshine Estates under Victoria's reign. As I helped Mom into our car, she gazed happily at the community center. "You know what, Michael? I don't think I would change what happened, not even the day they chained me down." "How can you say that?" I asked, stunned. "Because sometimes," she said wisely, "you need to see the worst in people to appreciate the best in others. Look around you." I followed her gaze to our neighbors. Janet organizing a community garden committee, The Williams family discussing a playground renovation, Sam setting up a neighborhood watch program. This wouldn't have happened without the crisis, Mom continued. People were comfortable in their isolation. Now they're connected, invested, watchful. She was right. The HOA that had tried to drive us apart had ultimately brought us together. Victoria Harrington had chained my disabled mother down, never imagining she was setting in motion her own downfall, or that the FBI had been watching, ready to bring justice when we needed it most. As we drove home under a sky full of stars, I reflected on how quickly life can change. 3 months ago, I'd stood helpless before people who abused their power. Today, because of courage, persistence, and unexpected allies, our community had reclaimed its soul. Mom patted my hand. First board meeting tomorrow. We have a lot of work to do. I smiled. Need your community outreach director's help? Always, she said, her eyes twinkling. But first, I think I'll sit on the porch for a while. It's a beautiful night. And that's exactly what we did. Sat together on the very porch where our ordeal began, watching over a neighborhood that now finally felt like home again.